There it is. Now we're recording. Okay. So we just like to, we pre-record our intros. So we just like to start out with a word from our sponsors. So we'll just pause and I'll insert it in.
And that'd be after you do a quick introduction of yourself, Eric.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and for this purposes, it's Colonel, we're gonna call you Colonel Eric Burns.
Yeah. Okay.
For the purpose of this. And yeah, I just want to clear that up. I mean, you call us whatever you want, but I think being that, especially if Marine Corps watches this, it's they're a little more hoorah than we are. So
Well, we don't want to
offend anybody.
offend the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
They might all come after us.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Not everybody.
I mean,
yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Do you want a rank address as well, or?
You call us Heath and Jamie, because actually by protocol, technically you're okay to call us by our first name going down.
Yeah.
By protocol, we have to call you by your rank. And you,
Well, we did it with Lieutenant, and you called him Joe.
I did a couple times. He's a lieutenant, not colonel. A little different.
Oh.
Yeah, he's no 03, not 06.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different. It's a little different.
Yep. Y'all do whatever you want.
Okay, but please feel free to call us Jamie and Heath. That's fine. But I think
Okay.
it's more appropriate to call you Colonel. Just in case you never know. In case you never know who's watching. With a colonel, you could have higher ranking people watching this just to be safe.
Okay.
I don't want to get nobody butt hurt.
Well, not watching, more listening.
Listening, not watching. Listening. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Right
It's
on.
audio only. But we're going to ask you some questions about. We'll start off tell us a little about yourself, then we'll go into the sponsor real quick,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll get into like when you join and kind of where you've been, what you've done, and then we'll get into some questions.
We
after
really
that.
want to break out with the Marine Corps mentality. Y'all have a different mentality, even though we're all together, and how that leadership, being a Marine Corps leader, may differ or is different from the Navy, and how that kind of goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Cool.
Hopefully we'll find that we're all pretty much on the same page, but
I think
are.
we are. I think we are. I just know that Marines are a little different, a little off.
we are a
To the
little
rest-
off.
to the rest
That's
of
fair.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And
So
just so you know, we might go in some challenges from when you joined in the 90s, right? You joined in the 90s, right?
I did. Yeah.
So what it is now, I know it's not different, right? So
Sure.
we'll get into that too.
okay. I'm just gonna raise my arms up so I could see when I need to edit out.
Okay.
We need. Oh, I have one of those things. Those things.
With
that
the cut, the
Yeah.
director
Yeah,
thing.
It's right there.
Director
but
thing.
I'm too lazy to get up and get it though.
All
also.
right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the E14 podcast. We're Heath and Jamie Britt. Sorry about that. We got with us today Colonel Eric Burns. Hey Colonel, how you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm well, guys. How are y'all?
Doing great.
We're doing great. Thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate the invite.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a colonel in the Marine Corps. Been in going on almost 25 years now. I'm a pilot by trade, so I've flown helicopters and tilt rotors and transport aircraft now. I'm currently in command of the headquarters battalion here in New Orleans in the support facility down in Algiers. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Great. Before we get any further, let's take a break for a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the E14 podcast, everybody. I got with us, like we said, Colonel Eric Burns. Now you're down in NOLA now. How long you been here?
Almost exactly a year. Yeah. Go ahead.
Have you enjoyed the hospitality down in Southeast Louisiana?
It's been great. I've got to say it's been unlike anywhere else we've been stationed. Folks are super welcoming, and I don't think we've met a stranger yet.
Definitely. How about some drive-through daiquiri huts?
That's again something I've not seen anywhere else. It's easy to get addicted to them.
It is. They're good.
Golly, especially back when the pandemic shut everything down, they stayed open, so you could still go through. We were stuck in our house for like 2 weeks, but you could still drive through the daiquiri. Those didn't shut down.
we've had to try to regulate ourselves so that we don't drive through too often. But yeah, it really fantastic.
I mean, besides just becoming a raging alcoholic, you can actually put on a lot of weight by drinking those damn things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all attest.
So if you could, sir, tell us when you joined, tell us where you've been, what you've done in your
Yeah.
time in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So I got commissioned back in January of 1997, right after I graduated from college in Virginia. And I'm an aviator by trade. So, Marines, we all go to Quantico for a few months first, then got to spend 2 years down in Pensacola. Did a tour out in San Diego, which was just phenomenal for anybody who's had a chance to go out west. Did that first tour. That was, the timing was such that was right around the start of the OEF. So we got to do a combat deployment out there, and then went on recruiting duty of all things in Raleigh, North Carolina. Yeah. So Jamie, I know you've
You know my pain. In the
yeah. It was good and bad, and I'm sure you feel the same way. You get to feel like you have a positive impact on folks' lives, which is really neat. But it's the business side of what we do, right? So there's always some challenge there. But I did that for a couple of years on active duty, and I actually left active duty for about 5 years. Went and pursued a civilian career, and
What is a civilian?
well, so I was a principal in a startup recruiting firm. So we actually
wow.
focused on helping military folks as they transitioned off of active duty to go find what we call developmental careers.
Wow.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So it felt like a way to continue to do some good and do well also. But that 5 years, the war was still going on, and I realized that I felt like I had some more service left in me. So I conned my wife into letting me come back on active duty, and I joined a helicopter squadron in Norfolk, Virginia, just in time to go on a deployment. We did a humanitarian trip out to the Caribbean and South America, and then I got to go back out west and transition to the tilt rotor platform. So back to San Diego, and then back to Norfolk, and then a couple of years up in DC and the Pentagon, and now here we are in New Orleans.
Now I have to ask, because you say tilt rotors, do you mean the Ospreys?
I do. Yeah.
What,
Oh, nice.
what is
nice.
the deal with those? Why are they breaking all the time? Coming from an air traffic controller here.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? When you take a component like an engine, right? That because we use the same engines as the C-130s do,
Wow.
and those things run forever when they just stay in one direction. But then when you want to move them through 90 degrees all the time, turns out that's not great for them. So you've just got a lot of components that are moving a lot throughout the various phases of flight, and we're Marines, so we try to beat them up about as bad as you can. And then you couple all that with it's a defense program, so there is a company in almost every state in the union that makes a part for that aircraft,
Wow.
and they're the only ones that make it. So you run through the whole, hey, things are going to break because we're tough on our toys, but then because it's new, we didn't know how many parts to buy from whomever makes them. So when things break, it breaks for a while.
And that's true. That's common with anything new, even in the Navy with the ships. You still learn it, and it happens. So first of all, you're the first Marine that we've had on this show.
That is so true. And before you get going with your next statement, Heath, I have an MV22 story that I have to tell.
No,
I just
please.
it's burning inside of me that I have to tell you this, because I don't think I've ever told you. But when I was in Djibouti, they gave us an opportunity as air traffic controllers to go on a FAM flight, or, familiarization flight of our airspace. And so, of course, the Marines were going out and they were going on their MV22 or the Osprey. And so we load up in there and we're flying, and Djibouti, when you're on boots on ground, is not great, but when you're in the air, it's really pretty. The sea is teal, the mountains are black, and I'm just enjoying the view outside of the back of this thing. Well, they said, hey, does anybody want to go to the edge and sit down and look at it? So of course I was like, heck yeah, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So they load us in the gunner's belt, and I unbuckle from my seat and I get ready to walk. And I realize at that point, I am deathly afraid of heights. So as
No,
I
you
like,
forgot you were definitely afraid of
well,
heights.
I
You knew
didn't.
you were.
Well, I didn't really know it was that bad because I've never had a part where my mind is like go and my body was like nope. My feet were like not moving. So everybody's like staring at me as I'm just standing there, like just a deer in the headlights standing there, and the Marine's like, "Come on, other people want to go. Hurry up." So he like takes my hand and he helps me down, helps me sit down, and I'm holding on the back of it, and it's rocky, it's shaking and everything, and I, like holding on to the plane is going to help me from falling out. But it was the best worst experience of my life. It was neat.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, for what it's worth, I'm scared of heights too. I've got friends that want to go learn to skydive and jump out of airplanes, and I've always wanted to be a good enough pilot that I never had to jump out because I am terrified of being out there, out in the open. So I'm with you.
I hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it's scary. But so like I said, I was saying earlier that you're the first Marine on our show. Congratulations.
No,
Ah,
we
well,
had
it's an
two
honor. Thank you.
enlisted.
Oh, yeah,
You're
we
the
had-
first officer.
I
Marine.
forgot we've had two enlisted
know.
Marines. Yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot.
There-
So you set me up and then you yank it away. But
I
that's
did.
okay.
I'm a bad sir. Sorry about that. I totally. That's the beer talking. I've been making merry waiting on the show to start.
Yeah,
So.
he has started his 4th of July.
Yeah,
early.
started early.
It's not even
Nice.
yet.
It's
No,
one
it's
now.
oh, it's one.
It's
Okay.
one. But the first Marine Corps officer, what attracted you to the Marine Corps Vice? Because there's a lot of good, because the Marine and Navy work together with flying. They do a lot of times they share the squadrons. What attracted you to the Marine Corps?
Well, my dad was a former Marine, which meant growing up, I wanted to go join the Air Force despite him. And, for a number of reasons, I didn't go down that path. But there's just something about the Marine Corps, the idea of, particularly if you want to be an aviator, you get to also be with Marines and lead and not just fly. And not to say that the other services don't do that, because they certainly do. But we kind of force it upon our folks. We believe that every Marine's a rifleman first, and that's whether you're enlisted or an officer, we hold on to that. And so kind of growing up and trying to figure out where I was going to end up, that was really a huge part of the appeal.
No, that's awesome. I totally agree with you. You're right. So every Marine is a rifleman first, and you had the opportunity to not only fly, but to lead young
You
Marines.
stay, like we call it, stay on the deck plates.
Stay on the deck
because
plates.
a lot
Yeah.
of times when you move up in rank, you become a paper pusher and you lose touch with the people.
Yep. Yeah, there's no question. And we do see some of that too. I mean, 2 years in the Pentagon was more about PowerPoints than time with our young Marines for
Wow.
sure. But getting to come back down here and spend time with our youngsters, I mean, that really is what makes it worthwhile.
Wow. So let's talk about Second Lieutenant Burns. Talking about
Yeah.
late 90s, right? So compared to now, what was the culture of Marine Corps compared to now? The kids, the officers, is it night and day?
So I would say at our core, we still have a lot of the same basic premises, right? You've got to care about the Marines. They're our most important asset, and we've got to look for ways to take care of them. Now, I will say in the 90s, what we found were acceptable ways to do that was probably a little bit different, right? I mean, you keep in mind things like we're in the middle of don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
There were things that you just didn't talk about. We didn't have the focus on command climate surveys and trying to really focus in on how our Marines are feeling in addition to how they're doing. We didn't really do all that. It was
Right.
Show up, do your job, and you either do it or you don't. But we probably didn't spend quite as much time trying to understand the motivation behind the actions, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's changed a lot in the Navy too, because we did a series recently on to help with the stigma of mental health.
Yeah.
And I know it back in the 90s, I joined in 96, 97. So I know what you're saying. So we didn't care about your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care. Hey, mission first, right? get the shit done. You don't see a broken arm or a broken leg, so they must be okay.
Yeah.
You're not
Right.
knowing what's going on in their head. No, it's common. I guess I bet that was common throughout all the services, not just the Navy and the Marine Corps. It's just the way it was.
You know, one of
Yeah.
the things that I saw as a distinguishing factor, because I went to A school in Pensacola for air traffic control, A school with the Marines, right? We did the same A school. And so we had gunnery sergeants for our instructors and Marine Corps classmates. But one of the, and mind you, I'm brand new out of boot camp, just in my A school. And one of the times it was cold, it was around December, and it was freezing in the classroom. And then gunnery sergeant said, "Are y'all cold?" And all the Navy people were like, "Yes, Gunny, yes, we're freezing," you know. And the Marines didn't say anything. And they were like, "That's right, Marines, because I didn't tell you you were cold."
And,
Yeah, that's,
go ahead, sir.
as you said, it sounds about right. I'm not going to tell you that we're 180 out from that now, right? But yeah, definitely, it's you just don't talk about those things. Because we're supposed to be tougher than
Right.
than
Right.
everyone else. We tell ourselves that. Whether or not it's true is a whole other
But
conversation.
you got to put it in your head.
Would you
because-
say that
Mhm.
that is one of the differences when it comes to mentality? That, you know, we joke and we laugh and we say, well, the Marines are a little off and there's something different about them. But would you say that that would be one of the distinguishing factors, is that y'all train to be tougher?
It is, I would say, and again, I'm not taking away from the training in any of the other services. Every service does what they do and they do it well, and they do it for a reason. But we do tend to be a little more demanding, a little more physically demanding, typically,
Yeah.
in our service. In all the training cycles, because truthfully, when we deploy, we get off the ship somewhere awful. Typically, we've got to be prepared to live without a lot of creature comforts. We've got to be able to, we're a small force, so we've got to do a lot with a very small number of people, and you just have to train that into yourself from the very beginning. Otherwise, it becomes a shock when you've got to go execute.
No, I totally agree, because when you guys hit land, right, hit the war, there's a lot expected out of y'all. Y'all are expected to live with the shock and awe,
Mhm.
That's right.
and do it quick and do it fast. And so you got a lot of weight on your shoulders. And I'll mimic what Jamie said. I was in a Met Cal class, in a calibration. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And we
Yeah.
were split with Navy and Marines. And it was so weird watching the Marine Corps guys. They were junior Marines. I'm talking about E3, E2, E3. And I was probably E5. And the difference between if we had a Navy instructor and a Marine instructor was night and day. It was
Well,
like 180 degrees. It was really enlightening to see that.
well, I think something else to consider too is we expect, from a leadership perspective, we expect our young NCOs to be able to operate. A young E4 should be able to take a team and go do things without really much other supervision, right? So we expect from a very early age that we're going to empower folks and train folks to be able to step up and really take quite a lot on. If for no other reason, we just don't have the excess manpower to
Wow.
push that higher.
Right. And I see that in Navy at certain rates, like bosun mates, the guys that, the decks of the ships. You see a BM3 running shit of E4
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
shit.
Mhm.
And it's not quite, that's what you say, it's not spread out throughout the Navy, but there are certain rates that do perform the way you're talking about. And it's awesome
Yeah.
to see, especially as a senior enlisted guy. It's awesome to see that. You're like, oh, this guy's taking care of business. It's pretty awesome to see.
Right. No, for
And
sure.
yeah. And I always had this mentality as a senior enlisted, like nothing against officers because we need them, but I always think I don't need an officer. I'll do that shit myself. Not dogging officers, just because that puts me, that's what I always thought of myself.
Working them out of their
Working them out their
position.
job. Like
Yeah.
I can do it. If he can do it, I can do it. If she can do it, I can do it. It was just that's just how I am. That just
Yeah.
I keep myself at a level. That's how I've always operated. Not against officers, because we do need them, but in my mind to keep to keep myself fresh. I always have to put that in my mind, or I'll get lazy, and I don't want that.
No, I'm with you. And the truth is, I think, when you get to the senior levels of both of those rank scales, right, it becomes, a definite collaborative effort with
Definitely.
the O side and the E side have a different experience base.
Exactly.
But we've got to balance each other out with some of those things for sure.
100%, sir. I just felt like I got to know what that guy knows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I always appreciate the officer side because, primarily in my experience, I've always dealt with aviators, which are really laid back. But, if planes aren't crashing, then what are we worried about? Come on, guys. Y'all are fighting about how you're supposed to fold this piece of paper. I mean, but the surface Navy, and I'm sure same for Marines, right? Surface folks versus aviators is just a completely different mindset. I don't know why aviation's so laid back, but it is. It's just there's bigger things to worry about. I don't know. Everybody's got stuff to worry about. What would you say?
I mean, I think you're right, Jamie. I mean, it's figuring out what's really important, right? When you're in a job where any day you could die, right? I mean, your plane could crash. You don't have to be in combat for it to be dangerous. So when you operate in that way, and it's the whole team. I flew multi-crew aircraft until now, and so we're up there as a team, and any one of us can cause that aircraft to go down. But when you work in that day in, day out, then it's the whole don't sweat the small stuff kind of
Right.
concept, right? Whereas in some other areas, it's a little bit like Office Space and TPS reports, right? Oh my
Right.
gosh, the format on this brief is wrong. What are we going to do? It doesn't matter. It just, but it's just a matter of perspective.
Right. When you're operating at 20,000, 30,000 feet,
Yeah,
the little shit doesn't mean that much.
Yeah.
that's right.
Compared.
I mean, there's stuff that'll kill you now and stuff that you can wait until later to worry about. And
Right.
you just
Right.
you have to learn which is which.
Definitely. So you got out for a few years, did a civilian sector, you came in, when did you come back in the Navy again? I mean, it's Marine Corps, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I left active duty in 2005. I stayed in the reserves and came back in full time in 2010.
Did you see a big, did you see a culture change in those years?
Well, yeah, so a couple of things were happening, right? So the wars were still going on, which was a really prolonged period of deployments and high stress and high op tempo. The Marine Corps grew significantly in that time. So Marine Corps has always been the smallest service. We still are, but somewhere in the 2005 2006 timeframe, we decided we are going to add about 30,000 Marines over the next several years. And so we're trying to grow. We're trying to build training systems to support that growth. And then we changed our mind and started shrinking back down again. But we're still constantly deploying. Things were starting to break. Equipment readiness was starting to become a problem. But that was also the time when we were starting to focus a little more on, concepts like resiliency, and we started to recognize that we're asking a lot out of our team, and if we didn't invest in trying to build some resiliency, build some mental health awareness, those sorts of things, that we weren't going to be able to sustain what we were doing, and so that was really, from my perspective, I don't know if that. If that's what y'all were seeing about the same time, but we really started to shift a little bit in terms of talking about things that we didn't used to talk about.
Yeah,
No.
we do preventative maintenance all of the time when it comes to our equipment. And then for the military to expect so much out of an asset, like a human being, and not do preventative maintenance is like, wait a minute, why is this such an epiphany? why is this such a big, or oh wow, maybe we should help our Marines, our sailors, before they get burnt out or get hurt or whatever. And it did happen around the same
Yeah,
time
about that
for the
time.
Navy, 2010 timeframe. And it's like, why did this take so long to get going?
Yeah, and what I recall, my assessment of your service then, deployments start getting longer. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh yeah.
you start to have some ship maintenance issues
Yeah.
that I don't think have necessarily been figured out. But that just means folks have to spend more time away. And you're right, Jamie. I mean, if how do we expect folks to just do that and do it for an extended period of time without some sort of an investment? And so it's unfortunate it took all those years to be able to start thinking about the preventative maintenance, if you will, on human capital.
Mhm.
Definitely. I remember like when my first ship, I did 2 or 3 tours to the Persian Gulf on the ship, and it was 6 months. I mean, you could almost count to a calendar date. It was going to be 6 months, and that was tiring. That's three.
Yeah.
That's a couple months to get there. That's 3 months in the Persian Gulf, and then back 2 months back. So I remember being burnt the hell out when we got back to home port. So I did that for a few years. Right before I left my first ship, they were getting ready to go on deployment. I missed that deployment because I transferred, but they did a 10 or 11 right during the height of the War on Terror. They did a 10 or 11th month, the same ship deployment. I
Yeah.
think they did something like 120 days straight at sea.
Wow.
I remember doing like 80, and that was a lot. I can't imagine you almost double that. And this was happening. This was a common thing. Other ships were doing. This wasn't just a one-time deal. Ever since the War on Terror, those guys have been humping. And then you got to think about the Marine Corps, their boots on ground a lot more.
Mhm.
Navy, we started something called an IA or a GSA where you go boots on ground too. That was unheard of for the Navy. Navy's doing it, working with the Army and working with the Marine Corps, boots on ground,
Yeah.
spreading thin, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think just as bad, I remember going through training and you'd go for a run, but they wouldn't tell you how long the run was going to be, right? And
Yeah.
there's this mental game, is it 2 miles? Is it 7 miles? You don't know until you're done.
Right.
And I think we're starting to see that with deployments, right? We know kind of when we're leaving, we really have no idea when it's going to be over. And so it's really hard to kind of build that mental toughness and kind of tell yourself, all right, I know I can do this for 3 more weeks. I'm going home, because it may be 3 weeks, it may be 3 months, and you just have to wait to see how it works out.
And you kind of alluded to it beforehand, but the Marine Corps is a small branch, and it has to remain small so that you could rapidly deploy. It cannot be big like the Army, right? Because they take much longer to ramp up. So with the Marine Corps being so small, that it's just you and that team, and that's it. Like there's no reliefs essentially coming, because it's just not enough manpower. Do you think that that takes a different toll on your Marines than it does in maybe the other branches?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that's a little bit why we're back to, why do we make our training so tough, and why do we have to,
Mhm.
make sure that we really believe that we're tougher than the other folks, is because what you just described is hard. And if you don't believe it, you're not going to make it through that sort of environment where, okay, I'm deploying and it's just us. Even a MEU, when they deploy, it's a really relatively small number of folks
Yeah.
kind of out there, doing their thing for some period of time and there's nobody on your left and right. So if you're not mentally tough, then that can break you pretty quickly.
Wow.
I've done deployments with the Marine Corps, with the MEU. Oh, sorry, bumped it. With the MEU on the amphib. And yeah, those guys, the senior enlisted, we ate with the senior enlisted. They came to the chief's mess, and they got a good, their outlook was really good. They got it. They don't need nothing. They got it. Hey man, what do you need? I don't need that. We got this. And I love that. I love that outlook, because you got to have that mental state, or you're going to fail. You got to feel like everything I do, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
If you don't have that winner's attitude, you're going to fail. And I thought it was great. I really impressed the hell out of me.
And moving back to what you said about resiliency, because y'all have that attitude, which is what most of our resiliency training centers around, is, hey, you need to essentially be more like the Marines, right? Be mental toughness and warrior, what is it, warrior ready or something like that. But I would imagine that since y'all already trained to that when y'all do resiliency training, it might be a little bit different than ours.
Well, I don't know that it really is. I mean, resiliency is resiliency. I do think we spend a little more time probably focusing on one, knowing within yourself when it's time to call for help, right?
Mm.
So you have to be resilient, but everybody's got their limit. And so we spend a lot of time now talking about trying to look internally and know when you need to raise your hand and ask for help. And then likewise, we really need to train our leaders to know what the signs are of our team to look for when they may not recognize they need help, but we need to,
Wow.
because we can all be resilient, but at some point, everybody has got that point where they're going to need some help to get through a tough time. And the hope is we can get them to to recognize it. I think of it as aviation training. They do hypoxia training for us, and we've all seen the videos when
Yep.
we're in Pensacola in a pressure chamber, and
Mhm.
you're in there playing patty cake or whatever, just to, hey, you start getting silly. This is what this looks like. So if you see this, that something, you're going to need some help. So I mean, it's the same with resiliency training. Let's talk about how you get through the hard times, but at some point, you've got to recognize when you're just not going to get through. You're going to need some assistance. But as you all know, when you look at somebody, to the left or right of you, and you realize, okay, I know that's not how you normally act. I need to know now that I've got to do something on your behalf. I think that's where we're spending a lot of our efforts now when we talk about that kind of training, which I don't think is that dissimilar from anybody else. I don't think there's no magic, and in fact, as we both know, our medical staff, they're all Navy corpsmen doctors,
Yeah.
right? So I think we're all pretty much on the same page in that regard. Um, our chaplain, uh, and this is my first tour where I've got a chaplain as part of my staff,
Wow.
talking through these sorts of things. He's a great naval officer that, it's great to have that experience to bring to bear.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And I'm gonna go back to something you said about knowing your Marines, knowing your peeps. So that's in the Navy we call that intrusive leadership. I don't know if y'all call that in the Marine Corps. Yeah, it's they got a million names for it. Intrusive is a catchphrase of the month, a catchphrase of the year. But we do some NSW adopted something that I really like. It's called a human factor survey. Basically,
Yeah.
you just sit down with your people, sailors, Marines, whoever it may be, and talk to them, what's bothering them. And it's open door. Feel free to, you make it comfortable. They can tell you everything. But, NSW started that, but I think most good leaders were doing that all along,
Mhm.
just by knowing their people and not sitting behind a damn desk in front of a computer walking around. Because I got some ADHD issues myself. I can't sit in front of a computer too long before I go nuts. I have to get up and walk around. So I think it's easier for people like that. But I think it's a good thing to adopt for those people that need to realize, look, I need to talk to my guys or gals
Yeah.
and find out what's going
No,
on. I love it.
you're exactly right. I mean, in aviation for years, we did what we called the Human Factors Council. So
Yeah.
at least once a month, we would talk pilots and aircrew, and just because that, it's an environment where things can go bad really quickly. So we would kind of force that. Okay, Burns, what's going? Anybody know anything about what's going on in his life? Well, he just his dog died, or
Right.
whatever it is. So okay, well let's make sure we're talking about those things. And then in the last few years, the Marine Corps has formalized that program in the Force Preservation Council, where we do it for everybody. So at least once a
Wow.
month,
That's awesome.
we expect, yeah, you expect your subordinate leaders to come in with, okay, I've got, this young lady just moved here and she's going through a divorce, and okay, let's talk about resources. What do we need to do? But let's watch. There are some folks that you just need to maybe spend a little more time with than others. Um, I'd like to think that we didn't have to formalize it, but
Right.
it's important enough that it's worth formalizing.
I think so.
This is so funny, and I'm gonna let everybody, our listeners, in on a little secret. Colonel Burns, Eric Burns, used to be our neighbor.
Yes.
It's-
Until like last month.
until like last month. So tying this all in, I have a chief who is a HMC. He deploys with. He's a Marine. He's a Greenside doc. Anyways, I was working, and I'm a recruiter. It's very stressful, and my coworker sits about, I'd say, 5 feet away from me. And so Chief comes in and he's like, "Hey, Britt, how's it going?" I was like, "Oh, I'm all right, Chief." And my coworker was like, she's fine. You don't need to not blah, 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 blah. And he was like, well, how's your family? How's everything going? What's going on? Man, Chief, I'm so stressed. I just had to move, and I had to move all the way across town, and we had to do it really quickly because our landlords were selling the house. And I just like let all of that stress out. And my coworker was like, I didn't know. And the chief looked at him and was like, that's because I talked to her. It sounds so simple. Like you said, we don't need to formalize it, but then again, it sounds so simple, but sometimes we miss the simple stuff.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I think the more mature we get, the more likely we are to probably keep that stuff inside, right?
Right.
Because so it actually gets harder as you progress in your career than
It does.
rather than easier. It's easy to go talk to a young Marine or a sailor and just, hey, what's going on with your life? What are you doing this weekend?
Mhm.
And you just find out stuff that you wouldn't have heard. But at our age, we compartmentalize a little bit more, and
Right.
so it really, from a senior leadership perspective, it really takes a lot of effort to make sure you're still, you know,
And
nugging into.
it's just asking the question really, because that sailor, that Marine, they're gonna tell you what's going on in their
Yeah,
life. It's just they maybe didn't think to express it, or like you said, they compartmentalized it to get the job done, and then it's like, oh, I'm all right, chief, I'm good, yes sir, I'm fine, and then when you ask the question, that's when they're like, oh, actually, I've got, I'm in debt $5,000 or whatever it may be. And it's not until we ask those questions.
yeah. Well, I'm sure y'all have had this experience as well. I mean, some of the most interesting conversations I've had, just walking down the hall and you see somebody who just looks like they're down, right?
Yeah.
And so all it takes is, hey, everything okay? What's going on in your life? And even if you don't have a close professional relationship with them, next thing you know, you're neck deep and holy
Yeah, right.
smokes, how are you dealing with all this stuff?
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, it's true.
So this series we're doing here, Colonel, is called The Charge of Leadership. Now we picked the charge of leadership because it's a charge. You're not always ready for it, but
Yeah,
And it can be heavy.
it can be heavy, and it's not really by maturity. It's more by rank. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So it's tough. It's not easy being in the leadership position because what you're doing, right, or how you were brought up ain't the same as a guy under your or girl under your charge. It could be a totally different way outlook of life. You just got to find a way to relate to everybody under your charge. That's why we called it the charge of leadership, because it's difficult.
Yeah.
it sure is. And Heath, you asked a little bit about, hey, you came into the '90s. What's different now? And I don't know if you're seeing this, but and maybe it's just a byproduct of I'm getting to be an old guy, right? I mean,
I hear
there
you.
there there is an age difference now, but I do feel like there are some generational differences in how you relate to folks that it just never really occurred to me that growing up, it's like you blink an eye and you're somewhere in your mid 40s, and the youngsters are, they're still 18 to 22 like they've
Yeah.
always been. But there are some things that change, and what they're, in some ways they're far more open than I think we were probably at their age. On the other hand, they think differently, and yeah, you got to figure out a way to connect somehow.
It's true, because I know, like, even with our oldest, he admits a lot of stuff that I would never admit as a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, why would you even tell me that?
Yeah.
And I think,
I was speeding down the road.
what, you were
like,
what? Well, back up a
Yeah.
little bit, dog. You were speeding.
Right.
Why are you telling us?
I think because we're ex-gen, Jamie might have fell into that. I don't know. She's kind of young, but I know for us, we're ex-gen, and we were left alone by ourselves a lot. I know I was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you fast forward 20 years, and you got the millennials, and they had a little more attention from the parents. Maybe that, with that relationship with the parents, maybe that's why they're a little more open than we were. Maybe,
Yeah.
but you got to filter a lot of stuff out if you're going to be effective. You got to
That's
you got to change, because as a young chief, I was like, man, it's my way or the highway. Well, that ain't really how it is, and I
No.
learned that quick. It's not
That's
my
right.
way or the highway. It's the end result at the end of the day. Did you get the result you wanted? If you
Right.
didn't, you might want to change up how you do business.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We see it all the time. You'll see a war developing between somebody in a senior position and a junior. Well, I said do this, and you're not doing exactly that. Okay, I mean, we can continue to beat our heads against the wall, or we can talk about as you said, what's the result that we're looking for? How else might we get there? And not
Right.
just make it about you do this because I said so. Because one thing I've learned about millennials, I don't know much about millennials. I'm still trying to figure it out for sure, but they're less inclined to do something because they're told to do that.
Right. Oh,
They really
definitely.
want to understand the why. And
Yes.
and we're not generally wired that way because that's
No.
not how we grew up.
No, because if my dad said do something, I did it. I didn't want
That's
my
right.
ass beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it's true. Any time that you tell them, and a lot of times you got to think about our jobs, right? Well, I'm a recruiter now, so a lot of things have slowed down. But back when I was an air traffic controller, you don't necessarily have the time to explain the why. Sometimes it's got to be like, do this and just do it. That's it. That's all the time we have. And I've had some blowups in the tower, like do this and why? I don't have time to tell you why. I said do it.
Right.
And so if I had come at them and said, there's a plane landing, so they need to hold short, that would have taken the exact same amount of time as have them hold short. Well, I'm just using that as an example because obviously if you tell someone to hold short at the runway, they'll do it. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just as an analogy, I think that, if all it changes is the way that we tell them how to do stuff, and it's completely fine.
Yeah. Yeah. We just need to all be willing to let go a little bit of how we did things 20 years ago and work to evolve.
Yeah, my big
And it
thing.
builds.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just to say it builds trust at the same
Yes.
time,
It
right?
does.
And it empowers them because they're doing it their way. And if you get the same results, so what?
Yeah.
And they get that ownership, empowerment, and it goes a long way.
You're right, and likewise, I think there's some value in just by virtue of experience, we can see them doing things a certain way that we know may not work out super well, but
Right.
when you can, sometimes there's value in okay, go give that a shot.
Right.
Let's talk when you're done and see how it went.
This-
And
You just got to make sure you're there to bail their ass out of trouble if they need it.
that's right. Yeah.
So I have a question, and we're going to take a little turn here from leadership, but I just have to know the term devil dog. Why are Marines called devil dogs?
So it goes back to World War I and Belleau Wood. Teufelhunden is the German word, right? So the short version of the story is, things hadn't always gone so well for us in the beginning of the war.
Mhm.
And then the Marines went in this forest, and just by sheer tenacity, basically started turning the tide. And the story is that some of the Germans were overheard kind of talking kind of a scared tone that Teufelhunden are coming, Teufelhunden devil dog, and so there's this
Oh.
fierceness that we brought to bear that stuck. And look, one thing about the Marine Corps, we are great at our own PR, right? So we'll take something like that, and that becomes part of our lore,
Right.
and
Yeah.
That's awesome.
it's part of who we are.
I love it because it is, and all, my dad, Marine, and just being with some of my Marine coworkers and stuff like that, it is a different, when we did land somewhere where there might have been enemies encroaching, and of course we had to get out and do a 360 security, but there is this, I would say like a safety or a warm feeling when you know that your Marine buddies next to you, the devil dogs are there. They're gonna handle the dirty work. They're gonna do it, and you just gotta stay behind them and
So
let
stay
them
out their
go.
way.
Yeah,
Stay
stay
out
out of
their
their
way.
way. Yeah. So I will say that, yeah, that devil dog mentality is great, and we need, and so needed for our military and so needed for our Navy, I think.
I believe it. I think it's good to have that because to add to your story, Colonel. So not only were they charging them with straight up fierceness, they were, they've been in the woods for a while, living hard, foaming at the mouth. They were coming at them like some banshees. They were freaking attacking them and they didn't give a shit. It's just that fierceness that when I heard, because I've heard that story before, long drawn out when I was at the SCA. And I'm serious, it pumped me the hell up. Just hearing that fierceness and that just pure, I'm going to win attitude.
Yeah.
That
coming at you
That's
with
right.
it
everything
motivates
that
the
I
hell out
have.
of me. That kind of shit motivates me.
Well, and like I said, those are the stories that we hold on to and kind of
Right.
built into, bake into our training because, whether it's that or stories like Chesty Puller saying something like, hey, we're surrounded. Awesome. We can attack in any direction,
Yeah.
hey, you don't want to live forever, right? I mean, these are
Yeah.
things that make us hold on to when things are tough. Hey, those folks that went before us were able to pull this off with really small numbers, really poor equipment in a lot of cases, but it's just sheer will. And we need our folks to believe that.
Yeah.
Definitely. And they made this country what it is. They made today, 4th of July, happy 4th, sir.
Right back at you.
They made this day so special.
True.
And I couldn't think of a better guy to have on our podcast on 4th of July than this great American Colonel Eric Burns. I appreciate it, sir.
Well, that's very kind of you. Like I said, it's really an honor to be here with y'all. I appreciate the invite for sure.
Thanks so much. And with that, we'll wish you fair winds.
And following seas.
So he's going to take off the recording. Hold on a second. That was so good. That was so interesting. I like that.
I appreciate it. It was fun talking to you guys.
Yeah, it was good seeing you again. I know Tracy said, oh, we miss y'all. It's just happening.